And thank you everyone for joining us today, and welcome to our first webinar in our new series on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or as we're calling it, the IIJA. As many of you know, over the past 2 years, ITS America's thought leadership, membership, and advocacy were critical in advancing technology priorities in what we now have as a historic investment in transportation over the next 5 years, with substantially increased technology eligibilities. At ITS America, we believe these transportation innovations will help make the communities we live, work, and play in safer, greener, smarter, and provide broader and more equitable access for people, connecting them to jobs, healthcare, education, and overall opportunity. Today, our ITS America staff will help you understand what ITS programs are in the law, what investment opportunities exist for the public and private sectors, and overview how we plan to support our members to take advantage of the funding opportunities. You may have heard us say this before, but there are over 45 ITS-related programs in the bill with billions of investment opportunity. Today, we want to provide our listeners with information to understand the timelines and upcoming funding opportunities and how your organization can take advantage of opportunities to seek federal funding. Lastly, we're also eager to hear from all of you. So we will be conducting live polling to hear from you on what's important and how ITS America can help you make the most out of this law and get us closer to our vision of a safer, greener, smarter future. So thank you once again. And now I'm going to hand it over to our COO, Kristen White.
Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are, everyone. We're thrilled that you're here to join us today. Before we overview some of the details of the top technology-related programs, are first going to share an introduction as to how ITS America is going to support its members to leverage the investments over the next 5 years and beyond. And then we're also going to do some member feedback to hear some early previews of what our members are telling us are their priorities under the new programs. And then, of course, open it up for Q&A. So on the next slide, we're going to give you a preview of ITS America's implementation plan for the IIJA, focusing on 3 core goals. First, to educate our membership. Second, to engage and inform the DOT and related federal agencies on programs that support transportation innovation. And 3, to convene stakeholders to progress conversations nationally and globally. Under our first goal, we have already introduced a comprehensive bill summary with ITS America staff overviewing the 45 plus related programs in the bill in great detail. And what we have also done is kicked off this webinar series starting today, where over the course of the next several years, we will be here to support you so that we can get you up-to-date information and support our members as they progress these priorities. This will culminate just this year over the summer in a deployer's guidebook on how to leverage some of the new funding opportunities out of the IIJA into programs in your own home communities and networks. And for ITS America members, you will receive up-to-date information from Momentum and Policy Rundown, our regular newsletters, as well as our Friday update calls have been reimagined to make sure that you get real-time up-to-date information. The second goal we're working on over the course of this historic investment, as Laura mentioned, is really ensuring that federal leaders, from appointees to career staff, understand how important transportation technology and innovation is to all of these programs that are being envisioned out of the law. This includes already responding to rulemaking comments, including the first RFIs that have already been released related to things like the Research Strategic Plan and the EV charging infrastructure. We are also planning to provide up-to-date information on NOFOs and help the DOT inform the criteria to include transportation technologies to make sure that we're serving all communities safer, greener, and smarter. We're also advocating that our members and our leadership are participating on some of the councils and advisory groups you'll be learning about today. And last, but certainly foundational to ITS America over the past 30 plus years, is convening and bringing people together. So we will be piloting state and local workshops to help innovators come together in public-private partnerships to develop grants and other project opportunities out of the IIJA funding. This will also include convening different roundtables and congressional tables with ITS America leaders and other federal officials, including our February 17th event, where we'll be inviting ITS America public and private sector executives to hear how they're planning their investments, as well as continuing and launching our advisory committees, including the new IIJA working group, which will be led by our membership starting later this month. With that, we are going to introduce the technology programs that we think are most important on the next slide for our members and the folks listening in today. So as you see, out of the 45 related programs that include ITS technology, we are going to be highlighting several of the programs that meet our goals for membership, including safer, greener, and smarter access to opportunity and other programming. So as you see this screen, we debuted this at the ITS America annual meeting in Charlotte, North Carolina. And today you're going to hear from Tim Drake, Morgan Ellis, and Nicole Dupuy, who will overview the details of these programs as we've learned already early this year. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Tim Drake, our Vice President of Policy and Regulatory Affairs.
Thank you, Kristen. We can go to the next slide. I'm going to start off by highlighting a few of the programs that we've placed under the SAFER category. And first, this starts with the Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation Grant Program, or the SMART program, which will provide grants for demonstration projects focused on advanced smart city and smart community technologies and systems to improve transportation efficiency and safety. This is the primary new technology grant program under IIJA. The bill provides $100 million for FY 2022 and $500 million over the course of 5 years. That funding will be split based on community size, with 40% of funding for large-sized communities defined as 400,000 or more residents, 30% for mid-sized, and 30% for rural communities with less than 50,000 residents. To be eligible, a project must demonstrate at least one of the following categories: coordinated automation. This is the use of automation or automated transportation and autonomous vehicles while working to minimize the impact on the accessibility of any other user group or mode of travel. Connected vehicles. These are vehicles that send and receive information regarding vehicle movement in the network and use vehicle-to-vehicle or vehicle-to-everything communications to provide advanced and reliable connectivity. Intelligent sensor-based infrastructure, which is the deployment and use of collective intelligent infrastructure that allows sensors to collect and report real-time data to inform everyday transportation-related operations and performance. The fourth category is systems integration, which is the integration of intelligent transportation systems with other existing systems and other advanced transportation technologies. The fifth is commerce delivery and logistics, with innovative data and technological solutions supporting efficient goods movement. This includes things such as vehicle probe data, road weather data, or GPS data to improve on-time pickup and delivery, improve travel time reliability, reducing fuel consumption and emissions, and reducing labor and vehicle maintenance costs. The next category is smart technology traffic signals, or improving the active management and functioning of traffic signals, including through automated traffic signal performance measures, strategies, activities, and projects that support active management, including timing, and improved vehicle, pedestrian, and bicycle detection, and other connected vehicle technologies. Leveraging use of innovative aviation technology, including the use of unmanned aircraft systems for traffic monitoring and infrastructure inspection. And finally, smart grid projects for the development of a programmable and efficient energy transmission and distribution system to support energy capture, EV deployment, or freight or commercial fleet fuel efficiency. One note on this, the White House has indicated that it expects the notice of funding opportunity to be released in either the second or third quarter of 2022. So still some time before that NOFO is released. The next program I'm going to highlight is the Advanced Transportation Technologies and Innovative Mobility Deployment Program. This program was formerly known as the ATC-MTD program. IIJA continues funding levels for ATT-IMD at $60 million per year. The federal cost share is up to 50%, and there's a 20% rural set aside. The program is for projects to deploy, install, or operate advanced transportation technologies to improve safety, mobility, efficiency, system performance, intermodal connectivity, and infrastructure return on investment. The bill retains the previous eligible transportation technologies and also expands the program's objectives to include improving the mobility of people and goods, improving the durability and extending the life of transportation infrastructure, and protecting the environment, among other objectives. The bill also makes vehicle-to-pedestrian technology eligible and mobility on demand projects. Finally, there is eligibility that will allow states and entities with stranded DSRC infrastructure assets from the FCC's decision on the 5.9 safety band to retrofit those assets to CVX technology and it allows an 80% federal match for those specific projects. The White House has not yet determined an expected release date for the ATT-IMD program yet. Next, I'm going to discuss the RAISE grant program, or Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. So it's formerly known as BUILD under the last administration, and TIGER before that. It's a program I think many of us are familiar with. IIJA provides $1.5 billion in FY 2022 and $7.5 billion over 5 years. There's also additional authorized funding that could be appropriated. Of that funding, at least 5% or $75 million will be awarded for planning projects, and at least 1% or $15 million will be awarded for projects located in areas of persistent poverty or historically disadvantaged communities. The minimum awards for the RAISE program are $5 million for urban projects and $1 million for rural projects. The maximum grant size is $25 million, and 50% of the funding will be for urban projects and 50% will be for rural projects. And urban is defined as 200,000 or more people. The federal cost share cannot exceed 80% except for projects in a rural area or those in historically disadvantaged or persistent poverty area. USDOT has actually already released the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the RAISE grant program. Applications are due April 14th, and we're required to announce, and DOT is required to announce awards within 270 days. So we expect those awards to be announced by August 12th, 2022. Because DOT has already released the Notice of Funding Opportunity, we have some insight into what the administration's priorities are for RAISE grants. And specifically, DOT noted that they're looking for 4 types of projects. 1, those that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and address climate change impacts. 2, those that address environmental justice, particularly for communities that disproportionately experience climate change related consequences. This is consistent with the administration's Justice 40 initiative. 3, that proactively address racial equity and barriers to opportunity. And 4, that support the creation of good paying jobs, including the free and fair choice to join a union and the incorporation of strong labor standards and training and placement programs. There's a number of statutory review criteria and additional considerations that the Secretary shall take into consideration when making awards. I'm just going to focus on one of the additional considerations, which is innovation. This includes describing how the innovative technologies will drive safety, equity, climate resilience, or economic outcomes. USDOT will also incorporate its 6 innovation principles into evaluation of innovative projects. And DOT has identified a number of innovative technologies that could be pursued, including conflict detection and mitigation technologies, dynamic signaling, smart traffic signals, signage and design features, V2X, V2I, V2G technologies, and cybersecurity and other ITS systems. 2 types of projects that won't be eligible are school bus electrification projects and broadband deployment as standalone project. The other large grant program that's a continuation, Infrastructure for Rebuilding America, or INFRA grant program. Technically, this is the nationally significant multimodal freight and highway program, but it will still be referred to as INFRA, I believe. A total of $8 billion has been provided for this program, including $4.8 billion through the Highway Trust Fund, which includes $1 billion for FY 2022, as well as $3.2 billion authorized from the general fund that would need to be appropriated. The funding under INFRA is for large projects. 50% of funding is for projects with total costs of at least $500 million. 50% is for projects with total costs between $100 million and $500 million. The federal cost share is a 60% maximum, and maximum federal involvement, so you can combine this with other grant funds, is 80%. And these are for competitive grants for multimodal freight and highway projects of national or regional significance to improve the safety, efficiency, and reliability of the movement of freight and people. And I think that the importance of this program is I think it provides an opportunity to include technology in some of these large-scale infrastructure projects to ensure that the infrastructure developed under these grants is prepared for the transportation system of the future. And I think incorporating technology into these projects is going to be important going forward. The White House has said that a notice of funding opportunity is expected in the first quarter of 2022. Finally, we have the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program, which is Vision Zero, an area we have become more involved with at ITS America over the last couple of years and see significant opportunity to expand the use of technology in Vision Zero plans across the country. IIJA provides $1 billion in FY 2022 and $5 billion over 5 years. Additionally, there's authorized funding from the general fund that could be provided. At least 40% of the funding will be provided for planning grants to help develop comprehensive safety action plans or Vision Zero plans. The federal cost share for these projects is 80%. The White House has said it expects to release the notice of funding opportunity in the first quarter of 2022. And it also has an award expectation of 270 days. So that would be about August 2022. Eligible entities here is interesting. MPOs are eligible, local governments, tribal governments, or any group of those in coordination with each other. However, states are not eligible for this program. Eligible projects include, as I mentioned, a comprehensive safety action plan or planning, design, and development activities for projects within an action plan, or to actually carry out projects and strategies identified in the action plan. There's a number of review criteria, including safety, community engagement, innovation, impact, evidence-based projects, and those that achieve other priorities that the Secretary has identified. Grant recipients will have to report their costs, outcomes and benefits, and lessons learned and recommendations, and US DOT will have to release best practices and lessons learned based on those reports. Again, I think Vision Zero is an opportunity for the transportation industry to enhance some of the deployment of technologies we see used across the country to improve safety in our community's streets. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Morgan Ellis, our Vice President for Sustainability.
Thanks, Tim. Good afternoon, good morning, and thank you all again for joining. Again, my name is Morgan Ellis, and I'm the VP of Sustainable Transportation here at ITS America. I'm going to be touching on some of the greener components related to IIJA. But first, I wanted to touch on some background related to sustainability and climate elements and how they're showing up in IIJA. The President and the administration have been clear on their commitments to combating the causes of climate change and adapting to the changes that we're already feeling and expect to experience in the future. Some of those commitments include the deployment of 500,000 EV chargers by 2030, and ensuring the US achieves 100% clean energy economy and net zero emissions by 2050. IIJA has many programs that are focused on the deployment of EVs and alternative fuel vehicles, clean energy, as well as building resiliency in the systems that we already have on the ground. Today, I'm pleased to highlight a few of the programs contained in IIJA today, specifically 5 programs that we believe will be of most interest to you and your organization. So let's dive in. First is the National Electric Charging Formula Program. This new $5 billion federal highways program is focused on the strategic deployment of electric vehicle charging infrastructure and establishing an interconnected network of EV chargers throughout the US. This network will facilitate data collection and exchange, will allow access and reliability for EV charging across the nation. Some eligible uses include the acquisition and installation of the EV charging infrastructure, operations and maintenance, and data sharing about the charging infrastructure to, again, ensure the long-term success and viability of this investment. We're expecting the Federal Highway Administration to publish guidance on this program around February 13th of this month, and following with a notice of funding. Just to note, ITS America did respond to a recent RFI that was released in January related to this program, asking a variety of questions about guidance and how to shoot that. If you're interested in learning more about that RFI and our response, please reach out to Bobby McCurdy. Next are the grants for charging and fueling infrastructure. This new competitive $1.25 billion grant program is open to states, MPOs, local governments, Indian tribes, and special purpose districts and public authorities, such as ports. This program establishes grants to strategically deploy publicly accessible alternative fueling infrastructure. You may be asking yourself, what is alternative fueling infrastructure? This includes fuels such as electricity, hydrogen, propane, and natural gas, all geared to helping to serve those alternative fuel vehicles. This infrastructure can be sited along designated alternative fueling corridors or in other key locations, such as rural areas and low and moderate income neighborhoods. those areas that may not otherwise have access to this type of infrastructure. I wanted to make a note that the propane infrastructure is reserved for medium and heavy duty vehicles, and light duty is not included in the propane fueling infrastructure. Eligible uses under this program include acquisition and installation of the infrastructure, operating assistance for the first 5 years after installation, acquisition and installation of key traffic control devices, and some key considerations for this grant program will include having real-time availability information related to the infrastructure, payment structures that are secure, including cybersecurity through the secure exchange of critical data, convenient payment options, and fair payment options. Collaboration with key stakeholders such as OEMs, utilities, technology providers, labor partners, and others will also be evaluated. The location and surrounding amenities to the infrastructure, as well as overall accessibility. And it was noted that they want the infrastructure to be responsive to technology. Specifically mentioned were AVs, vehicle-to-grid technology, and the infrastructure being adaptable to future charging methods. We expect the Federal Highway Administration to release the notice of funding in 2022. Next, we're going to shift into resiliency. The Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation, or PROTECT program, is a $7.3 billion formula funding to states and a $1.4 billion in competitive grants for state and local agencies, specifically geared toward improving the resiliency of our existing transportation infrastructure and systems. This new program will help support resiliency planning and improvements, community resilience, and strengthening key evacuation routes and at-risk coastal infrastructure. This program, again, is focused on making our existing transportation system more resilient to the impacts of climate that we're already experiencing and expect to experience in the future. States may use the PROTECT formula program to conduct resiliency planning, strengthen and protect evacuation routes, and increase the resilience of surface transportation infrastructure from the projected impacts of sea level rise, flooding, wildfires, extreme weather events, and other natural disasters. Highway, transit, and other port projects may be eligible under this funding. There are a variety of projects focused on infrastructure resiliency that I also wanted to highlight, related to flood mitigation, seismic retrofits, bridge retrofits, and evacuation road improvements. This includes the installation of communications and intelligent transportation systems equipment and infrastructure. So again, a key intersection with technology. The first round of funds were apportioned in December 2021, and we're waiting on updates for the continuing resolution to understand the next steps with funding distribution. So stay tuned. Next, the carbon reduction program. This new federal highways program totaling $6.5 billion will provide formula grants to states to reduce transportation emissions and help in the development of carbon reduction strategies in the transportation sector. States may use the carbon reduction program funds to support specific reductions for transportation emissions, including the construction, planning, and design of trail facilities for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other non-motorized forms of transportation. Public transportation projects are also eligible, as well as congestion management technologies. Some specific uses of interest include projects for the deployment of infrastructure based on intelligent transportation systems capital improvements, and the installation of vehicle-to-infrastructure communication equipment. This includes retrofitting dedicated DSRC technology deployed as C-V2X technology for existing pilots. Again, the first round of funds were apportioned in December of 2021, and we're waiting and monitoring the continuing resolution to learn more about the next round of funding. Last, I'd like to touch on the congestion relief program. This new Federal Highways $250 million program provides discretionary grants to advance innovative, integrated, and multimodal solutions to congestion relief for our most congested metropolitan areas throughout the US. The goals of this program are to reduce highway congestion, reduce economic and environmental costs associated with that congestion, including the transportation emissions, and optimizing existing highway capacity. through the usage of highway and transit systems, deployment and operation of integrated congestion management systems, systems that implement or enforce high occupancy vehicle use, tolling lanes, pricing strategies, and incentive programs that encourage carpooling and non-peak highway travel. We're going to keep monitoring this program as the next milestone is TBD. Another program that I'd like to mention that we're also monitoring is the Electric Vehicle Working Group. And again, this is going to be facilitated through the newly formed Joint DOT-DOE office. We're going to be reaching out to them and learning more. So again, stay tuned on the EV Working Group. Now I'd like to hand the presentation over to my colleague, Nicole Dupuy, to discuss the smarter program elements housed within IIJA. Nicole?
Thank you, Morgan, and thank you all for joining today. As was mentioned, my name is Nicole Dupuy, and I am ITS America's Vice President for Emerging Technologies and Innovative Mobility. And today I will be reviewing some of the programs relevant to emerging technologies and some interesting research efforts supported by IIJA. Starting with the Research on Connected Vehicle Technology Program, Section 24219, which requires US DOT to conduct research to examine how connected vehicle systems can safely account for vulnerable road users. The research effort will be a collaboration between NHTSA, the Intelligent Transportation Joint Program Office, and FHWA, and the resulting analysis must be submitted to Congress within 2 years, along with a publicly available report describing the findings of the research efforts. Interestingly, part of those findings must include an analysis of to the extent of which the applications supporting VRUs can be accommodated within existing spectrum allocations for connected vehicle systems. Next, I will give a review of the Emerging Technology Research Pilot Program, Section 13005, which establishes a DOT pilot program to conduct emerging technology research. So activities under this research program can include research and development activities relating to leveraging advanced and additive manufacturing technologies to increase the structural integrity and cost effectiveness of surface transportation infrastructure, research and development activities to reduce the impact of automated and connected driving systems and advanced driving assistance systems on pavement and infrastructure performance, and research aimed at improving transportation infrastructure design in anticipation of increased usage of AV systems and ADAS systems. The funding in this program is $5 million a year, and that is from the general fund. Next, we have the Vulnerable Road User Research Program, Section 11122, which directs the FHWA to establish a research plan to prioritize research on roadway designs, the development of safety countermeasures to minimize fatalities and serious injuries to vulnerable road users, and the promotion of biking and walking. So this includes research related to roadway safety improvements, including traffic calming techniques, vulnerable road user accommodations, appropriate in a suburban arterial context, the impacts of traffic speeds, and then on the evaluation side, tools to evaluate the impact of transportation improvements on projected rates and safety of biking and walking. There's also some interesting gray space in this program for other research areas to be determined by the administrator. So keep your eyes peeled for kind of what comes across the desk or of the administrator in terms of research priorities. The final two programs listed here include the ITS Program Advisory Committee and the NET Council. The bill reauthorizes and expands the membership of the Intelligent Transportation Systems Program Advisory Committee and actually broadens the scope and areas of expertise and experience for the committee and for those who are members of it. So it expands from 20 to 25 members. And we would really love to see some of you get involved in this effort. We want to see representatives from the ITS America community sitting on this committee. So another thing to mention is it sets member terms for 3 years. And then the Coordination on Emerging Transportation Technology, or the NET Council, this is just codified in the bill. So the aim of this council is to improve agency coordination to enable and regulate new and novel transportation technologies through the adoption of best practices, identification of lead modal administration for any given technology, and information sharing. So again, something we would love to see individuals in the ITS America community get involved in. With that, I will turn things back over to my colleague Tim to speak to a few more programs, and I look forward to answering any questions during the final Q&A.
Thank you, Nicole. Just a couple other programs that I wanted to touch on quickly. The first is cybersecurity related items. We advocated at ITS America for additional funding and eligibility for cybersecurity throughout federal transportation programs, and IIJA does make some developments there. For instance, it requires the FHWA to, within 2 years, to develop a cybersecurity tool to assist transportation authorities in identifying, detecting, protecting against, responding to, and recovering from cyber incidents, and requires FHWA to designate a cyber coordinator office responsible for monitoring, alerting, and advising transportation authorities of cyber incidents. Additionally, it adds eligibility for cybersecurity projects under the National Highway Performance Program and under the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. Another program I wanted to highlight is the National Per Mile User Fee Pilot. IIJA establishes this program to pilot the development and implementation of a national user fee. The bill provides $10 million for FY 2022 and $50 million over 5 years for the program. The pilot program will include volunteer participants from all 50 states, include both commercial and passenger vehicles, and requires USDOT to coordinate with states that previously received STSFA grants, or Surface Transportation System Funding Alternatives grants, that were established in the FAST Act. The objectives of the program are to test the design, acceptance, implementation, and financial sustainability of a national per mile user fee, address the need for additional revenue for surface transportation infrastructure, and provide recommendations relating to the adoption and implementation of a national per mile user fee. Additionally, IIJA establishes a federal system funding alternative advisory board, which will provide recommendations related to the structure, scope, and methodology for implementing that pilot program. Additionally, the advisory board will be responsible for carrying out a public awareness campaign and developing a report on a national user fee system. ITS America's Sustainability and Resiliency Committee undertook a process in 2021 to develop 6 principles surrounding the development of a federal road usage charge system. These principles called on USDOT to establish a road usage charge advisory committee of road users, experts, and practitioners to provide recommendations for the development of a road usage charge, lead a nationwide public education campaign to support the development and acceptance of a road usage charge, encourage the development of certain guidelines for technology and best practices to support the development of standards, encourage progress towards implementation of a RUC program through the STSFA program, promote the development of interoperability standards to create a seamless user experience, and to promote the development of standards for both actual and perceived risks of data use, security, and privacy. We were encouraged that some of these principles were included in IIJA, and we look forward to working with USDOT and the advisory committee on further development of a national RUC program. With that, I will turn it back over to Kristen White.
Well, I don't know about everyone online, but that is a lot of information. And so we're just going to highlight another 2 programs and then prepare for a real-time poll, because we want to hear, after what you've learned today, what are some of the programs that you're thinking about as top priorities for your work in all kinds of different fields in transportation innovation. So the last 2 things that we wanted to overview are, first and foremost, at the bottom of the screen, you see a focus on rural transportation, which is a huge priority for all of us to connect urban centers to all parts of America, including frontier America. This new program includes new $1 billion investment over the next 4 years to increase connectivity, safety, reliability, and the movement of freight to generate economic growth. The eligibilities here are for states, MPOs, tribes, and local governments, or any group of these, to apply for these opportunities that include highway safety in high-risk areas to access agriculture, commercial energy, or other intermodal facilities, really with the goal to include an ITS aspect of creating or maintaining an integrated mobility management system, transportation demand management system, or mobility on demand services. So this is really exciting. And the criteria include everything from generating regional and economic safety benefits, making sure it's cost effective, can include preliminary engineering, and other criteria could include increasing capacity or connectivity to improve mobility. And another ITS related criteria to use innovative project delivery approaches or transportation technologies, and they even call out broadband specifically. These grants are 25 million max, just like many of the other grants we heard today, with 25% of the program reserved for different parts of the country, including the Appalachians and rural communities. The last program we wanted to highlight today is one that is really resonating with all of us that work in this field, is the Transportation Workforce Development Program, a new needs assessment that the DOT is entering into with the National Academy of Sciences to create a report to educate and recruit intelligent transportation society and ITS workers across the country to develop a skilled workforce to install, maintain, manufacture, and operate ITS systems and identify barriers to deployment. This is really important for the administration as they call it making sure we include people with disabilities and underrepresented groups in ITS workforce development. This group will create an ITS technology and systems industry workforce development implementation plan. Say that 10 times fast. And that will include things like developing apprenticeships and other types of upskilling and reskilling of ITS workers to make sure that we all can benefit from these technology programs into the future. This $5 million program will result in a report that's due to Congress 1 year after the Academy concludes the assessment in the next couple of years. So with that, we want you to get your mouse or hands ready if you can and answer our first polling question of the day. Rachel is going to open up the Zoom poll right in front of you, and we want to hear from you based on just a few of the various programs, and we were only able to touch on a few today. What are our audience members and those of us in this industry thinking about for your programs? Please take some time and you can click any of the programs that you mentioned today. And later on in the program, if there's something not on this list that's really resonating with you, we will hear your feedback in the Q&A. We'll give folks just a few more minutes. Otherwise, we always welcome folks to engage us in the chat box. And we are ready to close in 3, 2, and 1. And Rachel is going to share the results of the live poll with all of us so that we can get an understanding. And this is consistent from what we're hearing early on from ITS America members and those in the ITS sector, is that the SMART Grant program, ATT, IMD, are very important for us. And of course, with the new RAISE NOFO that was announced just 2 weeks ago, we understand that's a priority for all of you. So ITS America will be providing up-to-minute services and support for our members. And we'll move on with the rest of the presentation to learn how that's taking place. Next slide, please. So now that we've heard a little bit, just a snippet of some of these programs, we wanted to share with you what ITS America members, including all of folks who are related to automated vehicle fields, connected vehicle and V2X fields, experts in emerging technologies, mobility on demand, sustainability, and other experts in the ITS industry, we asked them, what are you thinking about when it comes to what we need to do as an industry to prepare for this historic investment? And just last week, we kicked off our 6 standing advisory committees that are open to our members of ITS America. And in some real-time polling, they mentioned a few top priorities for us all, including really understanding how we can work with the federal agencies to integrate transportation technology and innovation into the programs, including some of the criteria you already heard us talk about today. They also want us to help make it easier to get access to these grants, recognizing the enormous investment it takes to build these partnerships and write grant applications. Next, we also heard from folks that they really want up-to-date real-time information when notices of funding opportunities are released. And that includes maybe allowing ITS America, since we are a public-private organization, to help in partnering and bringing people together to make connections to make these programs and projects possible. We also will be supporting members to share success stories on strong use cases of how ITS technology and innovation is happening across the country and the globe, including at our World Congress this September. They were also thinking about whether or not we can support the DOT to create a, quote, ITS framework on how we integrate ITS across the modal offices, the secretary offices, and the dozens of programs you even learned about today. And lastly, it's really important that we continue to educate policymakers on all of the work we're doing, which is evidenced by the recent automated vehicle hearing that was placed just last week in the House Transportation and Investment Committee. So with that, we're going to move on into another real-time poll because we want to hear from all of you. We want to ask, get your feedback on what you would like to hear from ITS America and the ITS industry. And so here in front of you, again, you can check any of the polling options as you can check as many as you need. What would you like to see from the ITS sector and ITS America leadership and members to help integrate all of these solutions into planning for a future that is safer, smarter, and greener? And we'll give folks about 10 to 15 seconds to respond. And we're going to close that poll in 3, 2, and 1, and we'll allow Rachel to summarize that and post the results again. So it seems that we see a majority of you all are looking for some sort of information and more information on eligibilities and the different programs and policies within. And then we see really close second, understanding how your organization and maybe even you individually can benefit from these programs. And of course, we will always continue to support the ITS sector to understand the top programs that relate to your work. So this also resonates with some of the early feedback we've been getting from ITS America membership. And I do want to recognize that we appreciate all of the chat box feedback in the poll, and we will be integrating that into our own programs and practices moving forward. So with that, we're going to move on to an open question and answer. You've got some of the top experts in the country whose sole job is to focus on the programs coming out of the IIJA. So we want to hear from you. There is a Q&A feature in Zoom that allows you to enter your question into Q&A. And so we want to take some time and answer, if we can, any of the questions that are at top of mind today. So that might be how we can support you, what programs and other opportunities and support you'd like to see. And so we're going to first start with our first question, which is relating to the carbon reduction program. So Morgan, we're going to ask you to help us answer, what are some of the expectations for carbon reduction beyond switching from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles? Can you explain a little bit more background, Morgan, on how will shared use and shared mobility help us to reduce carbon and the impacts of climate change?
Sure, and thank you, Ellen, for your question. I really appreciate it. So with the carbon reduction program, some of the other elements that I think should be of note include, this I will say is an interesting one because there are a lot of really diverse topics under the carbon reduction program. This includes, advanced truck stop electrification, so looking how to decrease idling. There is a note about freight movement and the environmental impacts within communities. So looking to diminish some of those emissions and the carbon emissions that go along with that. There's also an intersection with energy use, and so replace street lighting and traffic control devices with energy efficient alternatives is also housed within this. You also see some on-road, off-road improvements to biking, walking, and non-motorized accessibility. So this particular program, you're really seeing, I think, a lot more focus on if it doesn't fit neatly within a particular bucket, like an EV can fit here, alternative fuels can fit here. I think they're starting to tease out some of the eligibility that would come along with carbon reduction that don't necessarily have those neat and tidy boxes that might fit in other places. So that is also what I'm seeing in, what we've read in the carbon reduction program. I'm hoping to get a bit more information with the release request for information, really to hone in on some of really what those expectations would be related to size and scope of your geographic area. But at least with some of those, with the read that we have right now, that's what I'm interpreting from that. So thank you, Ellen.
And thank you, Morgan and Ellen, for that great conversation on some of the other related impacts of climate and how we're trying to plan for the future. There's a question from Sushindra asking about the startup economy and how startups can help get support to take advantage of some of these programs and these innovations. Sushindra asks, there are a lot of grant programs and some of them do seem familiar. So how can we leverage some of these opportunities if we don't know about a specific program? Well, for those of us on the call, ITS America is developing a partnership to help launch a new series of resources in the coming months that will include conversations on how you can, as a small company, start to understand what government entities are interested in partnering with small tech startups. That will include highlighting some of the wonderful resources coming out of the Public Spend Forum, an organization whose sole vision is to connect public sector innovation with private sector innovators at all levels of organizational growth. So we will be hosting some webinars to introduce this new partnership, as well in our Deployer's Guidebook, having an opportunity to understand how smaller tech startup companies really need to have additional resources, whether it's ITS America or our partners in other organizations and coalitions. Lastly, we are piloting some public-private sector workshops where we would love to hear from any of you who want to participate in partnering or participating in those, because we know that more resources are needed for all levels of sectors of innovation, including early tech startups, into understanding how they create collaboration and innovations with partners at all levels of government, and understanding what projects are really resonating with different communities to advance your own technology innovation. We hope that answers some of the early questions. We see another question here about the FHW policy memo regarding some of the most interesting updates coming out of the FHWA. And I will share with ITS America has been updating our members on our Friday policy calls on some of the recent developments on the Federal Highway Administration's policies and new recommendations coming out for state DOTs, for example. And for ITS America, we welcome you to join us as a member to learn about real-time information, how we can respond to those. And that includes early conversations with DOT multimodal leadership and secretary appointees and top leadership to understand what they need to learn from ITS industry and ITS America members, as well as how we can help inform those policies to be more innovative. We also have another question related to hydrogen-based fuel. Seems like sustainability is a big question top of mind today. So I'm going to bring back Morgan Ellis. Thank you.
I love it. I love these questions about alternative fuels and sustainability. So thank you, Douglas, for your question related to hydrogen. So throughout IIJA, we see a lot of mention and a lot of programs of note related to hydrogen. I haven't dug too deeply into a lot of these programs, but I do want to highlight a couple of where we're seeing it, and at least with this first sort of look through what's related to hydrogen. One is that there is a designation for regional clean hydrogen hubs. So looking at where hydrogen fueling can take place and what makes the most sense. There's clean hydrogen production qualifications. So again, green hydrogen versus brown hydrogen. There's a lot of conversation and dialogue about that. So diving a bit more deeply into understanding what those qualifications could be related to hydrogen. Clean hydrogen electrolysis programs. So research on how to get, again, clean hydrogen into the transportation system. And so those are a few, programs that I have actually pulled out and added to my spreadsheet for a deeper dive, because I know hydrogen will become more and more part of the conversation, especially as it relates to potentially medium and heavy duty vehicles. So that hydrogen is in IIJA. It's related to research, it's related to deployment, and related to where and how those fueling facilities can and should be placed. So thank you for that question, Douglas. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Morgan. We also recognize that some of you were very planful and offered questions for us well in advance of this discussion today. And so one of them was very specific, asking us, in what ways are equity and access incorporated into the distribution of funding out of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act? So for that, I'm going to welcome back Nicole Dupuy. Nicole?
Hi, thanks for having me back here. So really, equity and accessibility are prioritized all throughout IIJA. For instance, I'll just go through a couple of programs where equity really percolates up to the top. So the RAISE program, we talked about that earlier, which saw a significant increase in funding, prioritizes equity in its selection criteria. The Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program is a formula-based program for states, primarily for the purposes of state broadband planning and deployment. It can also be used to promote things like digital equity, things like promotion of broadband adoption, provision of affordable internet-connected devices, provision of free or subsidized Wi-Fi, high or reduced cost internet access to multifamily housing. Another set of grant programs that absolutely prioritize equity in this kind of digital infrastructure space include the Digital Equity Planning, Digital Equity Capacity, and Digital Equity Competitive Grant programs. So these are 3 NTIA administered grant programs, 2 formula-based and 1 competitive, that have the objectives to kind of plan for and promote digital inclusion and equity for communities that lack the skills, the technology, or the support needed to take advantage of broadband connections or some of these new digital infrastructure devices or technologies that we're seeing kind of become more popular and become more commonly implemented. Grants in this program can be used to accelerate the adoption of broadband through digital literacy training, workforce development, device access programs, and other digital inclusion matters. So again, that's just kind of a cross section in the kind of digital infrastructure space. And then as far as transit and accessibility is concerned, the All Station Accessibility Program dedicates capital funding to the upgrade and accessibility of legacy rail fixed skyway public transportation systems for people with disabilities, including those who use assistive devices. So again, just a few examples. If you look through the bill, you will find a lot of different mentions of equity in different places, different programs. Again, this shows up a lot in the eligibility criteria for the grant program. So I'll stop there, but those are just a few examples.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Just an introduction, right, of some of the opportunities coming out of equity and access long into the future. We also have a question relatedly on the idea of workforce development. And so David asks or reminds us that workforce development is so critical for underserved communities across the country. So what else can we be working on, or are we thinking about beyond the transportation workforce study that I already mentioned? Tim, I'd love to hand this to you.
Yeah, so I would just say that ITS America continues our focus on the future of work, and we've considered workforce development issues as we develop policy, including, for instance, under our sustainability and resiliency policy related to transportation electrification and EV charging infrastructure. This includes supporting public and private workforce development programs for manufacturing, maintenance, and operation of vehicles, charging infrastructure, and the electric grid. We see workforce development in various places throughout IIJA. So this includes Transportation Workforce Development Study, the GAO study on improving the efficiency of traffic systems on cybersecurity workforce needs, a set aside for workforce development under the Low or No Emission Bus Grant Program, as well as public transportation technical assistance and workforce development. Now, I would note that this administration in particular has elevated workforce development as a priority across all of its policies and program implementation efforts. We see a focus on workforce issues in many of the competitive grant programs, DOT's innovation principles, and in other ways. And I think addressing workforce is going to be a necessary component for any successful grant applications, regardless of the project or the program. With that, I'm happy to hand it, Kristen, back to you if there's anything else you want to add for that.
One thing that we know is critical in the transportation workforce is what our Mobility XX partnership with WTS and the Ray reminds us is this stark statistic that less than 15% of the 14.8 million jobs in transportation to date are held by women and women of color. Now, we are really, really re-emerging as a new coalition to understand how we combat that lack of inclusivity in the transportation workforce. And that includes a variety of opportunities that Mobility XX, and we will post that link in the chat box for you all to join us in the pledge to recruit, hire, retain, and promote women and women of color to make sure that our field and our workforce is diverse. As we know, we cannot create a resilient, inclusive system if it's not created by the people that are impacted by it and live within it. So it's very important that we recommit in every conversation to making sure our discussions, our panels, our research, and our work is inclusive and people felt belonged and important. With that, we also have a wonderful question about how can individuals get more involved with this work? And I would like to welcome Nicole and Morgan to bring themselves to camera because they and Tim are very important to the ITS sector's innovations with our 6 standing advisory committees, and the research trends and analysis that we provide to the industry, including federal agencies like DOE and DOT. So Tim and Nicole convene several of our 6 standing advisory committees, which are welcome to any existing ITS America. And if you're not a member yet, we will get you that information on our website. And anyone can participate in these committees, where members from auto manufacturers, tech startups, UTCs and research institutions, city transportation officials, and state DOTs come together to ask the key questions of the moment, just like how we answered some of the questions that some of you posed today. Morgan is also critical in helping us advise federal agencies in different programs related to climate reduction, resiliency, and alternative energies long into the future. So I would offer Tim, Nicole, and Morgan, how would you recommend people get more involved in ITS America work moving forward?
I mean, I would start off by echoing, if you're not yet a member of ITS America, now is a really exciting time in transportation policy. As Kristen outlined earlier in their conversation today, we're undertaking a really broad IIJA implementation effort that includes the help of our members through our IIJA implementation working group, but also that will include us providing resources to members so that they can seek out and compete for funding provided under the bill, and also working with US DOT to ensure that transportation technology is a priority when they're implementing the programs and policies under IIJA. We also do a number of other exciting things. I in particular am working on the VDEX and Connected Transportation Committee. There's a lot going on there, as well as sustainability and resiliency, which again is definitely seeing a moment right now in a focus from the federal side. I'm happy to have Morgan or Nicole add on top of that.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say I have the privilege of working with our Mobility on Demand Committee and our Emerging Technology Committee, where, you know, I'm definitely biased, but I think we have some of the most interesting conversations in the mobility policy space or in the mobility ecosystem space. Just some of the things we talk about in the Emerging Technologies Committee include digital twinning, urban air mobility, personal delivery devices. I mean, really kind of cutting edge and bleeding edge things in the mobility space. In our Mobility on Demand Committee, you know, we're also talking about, you know, what could be considered some really kind of cutting edge and interesting things, things like universal basic mobility pilots that are taking place across the country, systems and mobility providers that are deploying mobility wallets for their riders and users. So a lot of really fantastic and interesting conversations and work taking place. And I would encourage anybody who is interested, who is an ITS America member, to please reach out to me if you're interested in getting involved in either of those committees or any of our 6 standing committees. We're happy to accommodate that.
And the only thing that I will add is I will politely disagree with Nicole and say that the Sustainability and Resiliency Committee is really tackling what I think is the most interesting topics that range not just related to alternative fuel vehicles, but also how are we thinking about resiliency in our operations, in our actions, in how we deploy technology, and really those intersections. So just a plug for the Sustainability and Resiliency Committee, a lot of great conversation, as it is with all of our committees. So just echoing what Tim and Nicole said, become a member, really start to engage, and we'd love your voice at the table in those committees. So thank you all.
And thank you, everyone. On our last slide, we were sharing with you what we will be working on in the coming days and weeks, including helping to inform the DOT and inviting DOT officials into ITS America member meetings, where you can hear from them and help advocate directly on the transportation initiatives that we are talking about today that need to be integrated into future programming. We will also be releasing up-to-date information on a new IIJA website from ITS America to help inform all of you, including additional Friday update calls for those of you who are not part of of our Friday update calls and are an existing member, please contact Bobby McCurdy at ITSA. And we will also continue to support our membership with conversations like this, including on February 17th, where we're hearing from public and private sector executives on how they plan to use IIJA funding moving forward. A link to that webinar opportunity will be in the chat box. Otherwise, we will be summarizing this for everyone in a FAQ sheet that will be posted online, as well as the recording will be posted after the fact. With that, I'm going to allow our President and CEO, Laura Chase, to conclude.
Well, thank you, everyone. I just want to give a great big shout out to our incredible staff. You guys did an amazing job. We're very fortunate to have such a great team of experts leading our work here. I want to thank all of our members and stakeholders who joined in today's briefing. There's a lot of information, and this is just the beginning. So it's very exciting. We look forward to supporting you and working with you. And we had several questions about, how do I get this information? How do I get involved? We have talked about membership. Absolutely, the best way to get involved and influence the work is to become a member. If you want to, you can email Kristen White. Her email is on the screen. If you are a member and want to get more involved, please email Brenna Rivet. Her email is also on the screen. And we just really appreciate your time, and we look forward to the next IIJA webinar. So thank you so much, and we will see you next time.